Hi, this is Lisa Wilding Brown of Innovate MR, and I'm here today with Mark Menig, our CEO of True Sample. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Lisa. Good morning.
Good morning to you. So it's our second podcast session. I'm so excited. We have lots to talk about.
Yeah.
There's one thing that's popped up recently that I wanted to ask you about. I think a lot of the clients I speak with on a day in and day out basis are under the impression that in their studies, IP address should always be unique, and that if there are
Mhm.
duplicate IP addresses, that something is amiss, something's wrong, and that automatically points to fraud. I wanted to get your opinion on that because I know it's not as cut and dry as we might be assuming.
Right. Yeah. No, I wish it was more cut and dry, right? I think that would be easier for all of us. And it's the consistent thing that we see is change is the one consistency, right? And I know that's an oxymoron, but it continues to be true in our industry and really all industries, especially those that touch technology and different things. Your question there around duplicate IPs and really unique IPs as well, it is a two-sided coin. So with duplicate IPs, what do we see in our data all the time? Do we see duplicate respondents have duplicate IP addresses? Yes, absolutely, right? I'm not going to pretend like that's not the case. But, and this is a big but, are all duplicate IPs duplicate respondents? And that answer is absolutely not. And that's the part that people tend to not fully understand, don't have their heads wrapped around, and those types of things. With IPs, it's a challenging kind of space within the internet. IP addresses, and not everybody knows this, but they are governed by a little bit of a governing body. It's not an official government entity or anything like that, but there is an organization that really deals with IP addresses and the allocation of IP addresses, both to the country level as well as to the specific classification level. And the IP classification is actually the part that people tend to know the least about. Everybody tends to have a degree of familiarity with the idea of geolocation and taking an IP address and it belongs to a particular country. What people don't realize is that the IP address, the country rather, that an IP address belongs to can change from month to month, as well as the classification type is very important to understand. And why do I say that? Well, because the classification type, depending on what it is going to lend itself more or less to the ability to have a duplicate IP address represent a unique individual. So various types of classifications that are out there are things like residential IPs. Those tend to be a little bit more unique in terms of representing individuals at the IP address level. But then you have other classification types that go the other way. So commercial classification, so all of your business IPs, military, university, and then the big one, and this is the catchphrase here, mobile, but the mobile IPs. So anytime you've got people out and about, out in the world, just moving around, and they're on their mobile phone using a mobile connection to the internet, many people, unique people, are sharing the same IP address through that classification. And so that's really where people get a little bit caught up in this idea of duplicate IPs and everything, and it actually harkens back to 7, 8, 10 years ago when we had more of that fixed proximity, research environment where we had a single desktop stationary device in the home that was being used to access the internet. That's simply not the case anymore. And with that comes some of these changes and challenges around IP addresses and those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think mobile users present new challenges for us because, they're on the move. And they may start your survey in one location and may finish it in another location.
Absolutely.
So it's important to be looking at, users from a more cohesive perspective, looking at all the other fraud markers that, come in with them when they start a survey, because that obviously can be very indicative of whether they're good or more malicious in nature, or, an innocent duplicate, situation where you might be using multiple vendors on a given study. So it isn't always worst case scenario, there can be sort of innocent duplication that can present issues for your study.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And then, obviously the other flip side of that is unique IP addresses.
Mm-hmm.
And are unique IP addresses going to guarantee that you have unique individuals, right? That's the other side of the coin. And what most people assume is that, yeah, as long as I have a unique IP address, then I don't have a duplicate. And unfortunately, that is not the case.
Mm-hmm.
The most recent data that we've been reviewing at TrueSample shows upwards of 40% of identified duplicate respondents actually have unique IP addresses within the survey when they're taking it. And that comes from a combination of things. It can be that they're actually purposely rotating their IP address as a means to try to make their device look more unique than it is if your solution relies too heavily on IP address as the mechanism for deduplication.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the reasons that, one device fingerprinting solution is not always going to be the same as the next.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incumbent on everybody in the industry, if we're using these solutions, relying on these solutions, we need to understand them.
Mm-hmm.
We need to test them, and we need to really know what goes into the underlying algorithms and how we're accounting for all of these nuances and all of these continued kind of evolutions in consumer internet behavior.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. It's funny, trust is something that's really hard to earn, but very easy to lose. And, I would be disingenuous if I said I've never run into quality issues. I mean, obviously we're talking today, and as a sample provider, it's something that I think I'm very well educated on. I have experience in, been working in the panel space for many, many years. But I wanted to get your opinion on, what you think sample buyers can do to be better prepared. For me, from my perspective, I guess I'll start there. I think there's a disconnect between people who sell respondent sample and people who buy it. And I think a lot of buyers have the expectation that sample will be 100% clean, and if it's not, then they're using a sample provider that is, is of a low value, and that they should move on to another sample provider. And unfortunately, I think online fraud, duplication, what we live and breathe every day in terms of quality control, it's something that's very iterative, it's dynamic, it's evolving. I often will liken it to computer viruses. You've got major companies like McAfee that are constantly looking to see what the new strain of virus is out there. And they're, iterating on their product to try to make it as proactive as possible. But in some instances, they're reacting to what the newest strain is. And, in a perfect world and in an alternate universe, I wish I could say that every time we'll be prepared and we'll know what's coming. But sophisticated fraudsters out there often seem like they're one step ahead. Sure. And I just wanted to get your impression, Mark, because you've obviously been in the space a long time now and had a front seat to quality and have done a lot of research on this. What are your impressions on the relationship between the buyer and the seller, and what do you think sample buyers can do to be better prepared, and do you think their expectations are too high? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but I will try to keep it short for the purposes of today's recording, at least. I think there is a really big disconnect in the industry between buyers and sellers around expectations, around responsibilities, and those types of things. The old adage is there's only two certainties out there, right? Death and taxes. And that's true. And a lot of times, this concept of 100% clean sample being the expectation of what you're buying from your sample provider, really unrealistic, really unfair, because there's only so much, especially in a sample-only scenario. You can't account for every situation as a sample seller of, wait, what if my otherwise good respondent who has been good for the last 3 months on every opportunity they've done has a bad day. They're in a bad mood. You give them a survey design and experience of taking that survey that's just terrible. There's so many things outside of the control of you as the seller in that one that, again, you can do everything you can, but you can't guarantee that it's going to be 100% clean sample. I think the analogy to help people wrap their heads around it is, do you get an A in school only if you get 100% on the test? No, 92% is going to give you an A as well. And that's really no different at the end of the day. And the idea to me, and I wish I could give my customers 100% guarantee, just use our tools and you're good, right? I would love to have that be my marketing pitch.
Me too.
But I'd be lying if I did that. And so I have to always caveat every conversation I have with a customer or prospective customer and say, I can't guarantee you, right? I can say that, on average, this is how our customers get return on value for the investment they make in data quality, fraud detection, and those types of things. But I often position it as, my goal is not to throw out as much sample as possible within your survey, meaning I'm not trying to throw out every bad respondent, every duplicate, and those types of things. I'm trying to throw out enough to make sure that you have the right degree of confidence that you want in your data, in the decision that you're going to make, in that recommendation that's going to go to your customer further down or upstream, depending on which way you want to think about it. It's really boils back down to risk. And I think as an industry, we need to do more education around risk and really understanding what risk is, how risk is calculated, and those types of things. And there's industries out there that we can learn from, like insurance. Insurance is a fabulous industry that really understands risk and how to price for it and how to account for it and those types of things. Their entire business model is really predicated on the idea of understanding the risk associated with an individual, with a situation, those types of things, and then protecting themselves appropriately, not eliminating the risk altogether, but just protecting themselves in the right ways to the right extent such that they can have the comfort and confidence to still move forward and still operate as an industry and then allow individuals to operate in life. And that's really, to me, what we're trying to do in research. We're kind of, we're operating in this world where everybody wants somebody else to be responsible for it. We want we want one person to be 100% responsible when really we all have a component of that responsibility. And then, as you were asking, I think we need to get aligned on what the goal is. And if the goal is going to be 100% clean sample every time in the survey, we're going to throw a lot of good respondents out as a result because the false positives at that kind of level are going to, in my opinion, surpass our ability to simply throw out the fraud.
Right.
And so we're going to end up in a negative value situation because we've thrown out too much good along with the bad.
I mean, for me, it's really about risk mitigation. And certainly there's a lot of things as a sample provider that I can do. But one of the challenges I face is that, there's an insatiable appetite for respondents in our space. And unfortunately, they often meet a survey that is 30 minutes long. It's pretty arduous in design. And so we're constantly, as sample providers, combating pretty significant attrition rates. And so I can't always give highly tenured respondents to a study. I have to balance that. And I should balance it for a number of reasons, not just because I have to, but because it, helps to create better balance for us and for our clients. But oftentimes we'll be recruiting new people into our panel and we don't have as much visibility. Certainly I have access to the fraud markers through tools like TrueSample, but clients often have that front seat to respondent behavior and actually know that respondent more because they've had them go through a 30-minute questionnaire.
Right.
So it's always important to get that feedback loop from our clients. It's very helpful. And I think there's a challenge, just in the natural life cycle of research, right? So we send panelists into a client survey. They collect the data for a number of days, and then it goes into the analysis period. And then hopefully out to the client for their end client for final findings and helping them make those decisions. We'll hear back from clients often saying, well, if I'm discovering that I don't like some of these respondents in the analytics portion of this project life cycle, it's almost too late. I'm
Right.
sort of behind the eight ball. And, that's a challenge. And I have a lot of empathy for that. But I always say to clients, like, you've got to sort of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And
Right.
put in lots and lots of layers of protection, and really partner with the sample providers that you're using, but also put yourselves in the best position possible. And that means having trap questions in your survey, over collecting.
Mhm.
Back when I was at Harris many years ago, we always over collected about 10 to 15% of the sample that we needed so that we had more elbow room on the back end and we could clean out the respondents that we didn't want to include in the final data set. So little things like that can really help set you up for success and not introduce extra time to an already, I'm sure, very tight schedule. But to me, I think the important thing to remember is it's a collaborative effort, and it's something that is a natural byproduct of our space. It's not something that automatically means a sample provider is somehow a low value sample provider. It's something that happens to every single one of them. And it's about, really holding hands on this and being true collaborative partners, and working together. Because I always say this to clients, if large government bodies get hacked and multi-billion-dollar
Right.
brands are getting
Right.
hacked, this is a very sophisticated challenge, and we're being naive if we think that the market research space is somehow impervious to online data quality issues.
Oh,
We're right in the
absolutely.
mix, and we need to go in expecting the worst and planning for the best, and just, really hold hands on this, I think.
Yeah, right or wrong, when I was a sample buyer in previous roles, um, the mentality that I think I brought to managing the relationship with our sample partners, and we called them that because we really did try to have a partnership mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But I always went in with the assumption of, certainly not that I would never have a data quality issue with one of my tried and true trusted partners.
Mm-hmm.
It was never a question of if, it was just a question of when.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're playing the probabilities. It's going to happen if you do enough projects.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and for me, the test was always not did I have a data quality issue with the provider, but how did they handle it when we did?
Mm-hmm.
That to me was what separated my vendors and my suppliers from my true partners.
Mm-hmm.
My partners had a better, different way of dealing with the inevitable with me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what I valued,
Mm-hmm.
was how they handled it and how we dealt with it together and those types of things. And so that became far more valuable to me in the overall vetting and analysis of who we were going to work with and where we were going to spend, our dollars on sample and those types of things. Was again not about the if, but the when, and then how did we handle it together? That
Mm-hmm.
became the real differentiator for me.
That's great commentary, Mark. Well, I'm sure we could be waffling about this all day, but I'm sensitive to our listeners' time. So thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Mark, for your time. And I'll look forward to the next podcast on sample quality, because this is definitely a topic that we could talk many hours on. And I'm sure there's lots more that both you and I have to say. So thanks
No,
for your
for
time.
sure. Thank you for your time as well. This is great.
All right, take care. Till next
Bye-bye.
time.